Um, I kind of knew. I kind of knew that it wasn't a heart attack. I mean, it was sad, and I had it confirmed that same afternoon. I ran home and asked a nanny whether it was true, and I understood why they'd hidden it from me, but I dedicate the book to her because I knew that in order to finally heal and have my third act be a beginning, I had to come to terms with my mother. And the minute I started writing the book, people that knew her just came into my life like miracles, and I got her medical records and learned a lot about her, including the fact that she'd been abused, which helped me understand everything. The puzzle got put together, and of course, once you understand why your parents are the way they are, you can then forgive them.
She was depressed when you were with her?
Manic depression.
Yeah.
She suffered from manic depression, yes.
Right. And what did you learn from that? What did you learn from your mom while she was alive? And what have you learned since understanding how she died?
I don't know what I learned genetically from my mother. She was generous, she was ebullient, she was, I didn't know it was manic, but I knew that when she was up and wonderful and generous and laughing and liked to have a good time. I have all those things from her. She kind of leavened my father's Calvinist Midwest stock. But children are so wise, aren't they? I mean, children know. I knew somewhere that there was something deeply wrong, that there was a psychic fissure that made it impossible for her to really love. And so when I read 2 years ago, when I was writing the book, that she had been sexually abused as a little girl, plus beaten by her father, not abused sexually by her father, but beaten as well, I understood everything. When a girl is sexually abused, or a boy, it's a form of brainwashing. They lose a sense of themselves. They lose parameters. They lose the feeling that they have control over their bodies. They tend to become promiscuous, and they tend to hate themselves. They take on guilt because they feel responsible, as all children do, even though they're the victims, but they feel responsible. And for 10 years, I've been studying the effects of abuse on girls, and I don't know, I didn't know why I was drawn to it, and I suddenly understood her.
So much is repressed internally as well. Try to push it away, but they push it down inward. And it makes it for a very difficult life.
End up hating their bodies, often self-mutilating, and yet at the same time, girls who have sexuality forced on them too early, there's an odd luminosity about them. And you know, when I read my father's book, he describes her as a beacon. Other people call her an icon, a rock. I'm thinking, this isn't the woman that I knew, but now I understand. There were those contradictions.
Did she ever talk to you about be careful, don't let anyone abuse you, be careful of strangers, anything like that? Gave you any kind of hint?
The only thing I ever remember her saying to me along those lines was never marry a musician.
Why was that?
I think that while my father was in the Navy, she'd fallen in love with a musician who'd hurt her.
Ah.
I was only 7 when she said it, and it was like, why that? You know, instead of keep your eye on the ball or whatever parents say, it was never marry a musician. What did she know about musicians? It took me until I was writing that book to find out why she had said that.
Beware the rock star. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking to Jane Fonda. Her new book, My Life So Far. A lot more after this. And we're back. Our guest tonight is Jane Fonda. Her book, My Life So Far. Henry Fonda, your dad. Mm-hmm. Tell us about him.
Did you see on Golden Pond?
Yes.
Well, a lot of Norman Thayer was my father. He had a hard time expressing emotions. I think it's why the movie meant so much to so many people, because many of us have had fathers like that.
Did he ever tell you he loved you?
Not that I recall. No, I don't think so, and I think I would have remembered it. What was so interesting about him, though, was that this Midwestern, austere, remote, cold exterior, but he did macrame, he did needlepoint, he painted like a dream. And he expressed such depth in many of his roles, you know, so there
A
was
very sensitive man.
oh yeah, there were these outlets where you could see the soul of the man and the sensitivity. He just couldn't do it with the people who were the most, you know, close to him.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know.
Did you ever talk to him about it?
No, you didn't do that. No, no, no.
You couldn't talk to your dad?
No, no.
Request an appointment? Send him a letter?
You know, while I was writing the book, I can't remember why, I got a call from Yolanda King, Martin Luther King Jr., one of his daughters, and I asked her, I said, did your father ever take you on his lap? And Martin Luther King Jr., did he tell you about life and values and how to live? And she said, no, he never did. And I said, but you had his sermons, and I had my father's films. You know, sometimes you can't have everything, right? So.
He was a real perfectionist.
He was, yes, he was.
If he didn't teach you by words, Jane, did he teach you by actions, by example?
Yes, he taught me by osmosis. This was a man of tremendous integrity. And he was bedrock Midwestern, you know, fine, fine person. And I adored him, and so I wanted to be like that and be like the character. He did those characters that he played because he wanted to be like that, and I wanted to be like that. And so, you know, the good news is the person I wanted to be like was an incredible person. The bad news is that I never felt good enough for him. Happens.
The scene in Golden Pond, Jane, I think that maybe you and I should have the kind of relationship that we're supposed to have. Your dad, what kind of relationship is that? Jane, well, you know, like a father and a daughter. Dad, just in the nick of time, huh? Worrying about the will, are you? Well, I'm leaving everything to you except what I'm taking with me. Jane, just stop it. I don't want anything. It seems that you and I have been mad at each other for so long. Dad, I didn't think we were mad. I thought we just didn't like each other. Wow.
I know. It was an amazing experience to play that with him. Father-daughter in the movie, father-daughter in real life.
And then later you said, I want to be your friend, and you touched him. And what happened? Well,
Dad didn't like to have anything happen that hadn't been rehearsed. It really bothered him. And I wanted to do something that hadn't been rehearsed because I wanted to see emotion arise in him. And so the last close-up on him, when I said, I want to be your friend, I reached out and I touched his arm, and I could see on his face. I mean, it just took him, I mean, it's microscopic, but it took him, and the tears came immediately, and he ducked his head like this because he didn't want anyone to see, but I saw.
What did that mean to you?
It meant the world to me. And that night, I'd had a very difficult time with the scene. Actor's nightmare, I kind of dried up, and it was such an intense scene for me. And the end of the day, I asked if I could come over to his house with Shirley, his wife, for dinner, because I wanted to tell him what had happened to me, the drying up and not having any emotions, and seeing if it had ever happened to him. And then I wanted to see if the chemistry between us had changed as a result of the scene. And so I went over and I told him what had happened, you know, that I hadn't been able to muster any emotions at first. And I said, did that ever happen to you, Dad? Nope. Never in your home? Nope. And I realized that nothing had changed, although I don't know whether maybe in some deep place something had changed. All I know is, how lucky could I get? I mean, how lucky to be able to produce a movie like that for my father, and to have a relationship like that with him in the movie. And where at least at the end of the movie he put his arm around me and we embraced, and that won him his Oscar. His only Oscar after all that body of work.
You won one before he did.
2.
Yeah.
I won 2 before him.
Luton Coming Home.
And he won it and died 5 months later. I mean, I feel so blessed. So blessed.
And your lasting memory of him is the spontaneous moment in a movie.
Yeah.
And then when you asked him to reinforce it with his words, he just couldn't do it.
No, he couldn't do it. But maybe he wanted to.
When you were a little girl, you said he called you fat.
No, he never called me fat directly. He would tell his wives to tell me to wear, different dresses and not to wear bikinis and so forth. And the message was that I was fat, yes.
Did you ever go to him directly and say, Dad?
No, you don't understand, Tim. You don't do that. You didn't go to him directly with anything.
Did you go back through your mom or his
Well,
wife?
no, I just, like we do, you absorb it and assume it's true and try to figure out, how you can be more perfect, and then you just do bad things to yourself because you're not good enough.
Did you ever talk to anyone growing up saying, I wish I could talk to my dad. I wish he would show me that he loved me? Or did you keep it within?
I think I just kept it within.
Difficult.
I just assumed that was the right way to be because he was my father and because I loved him so much.
That's the way dads were.
Yeah. And, in that generation, that's kind of the way they were. And what I'm glad about is, although I really respected him and admired him and loved him, even the things that he didn't approve of, like acting classes and therapy and things like that, I kind of did them anyway. It's like this is where the resiliency comes in. I always sort of knew what I needed to do to survive and get better, even though I did it with huge feelings of guilt and trepidation because he so disapproved.
He always thought you could just work it out yourself if you were strong enough?
Bootstraps, Horatio Alger, absolutely. And then when you can't do it, you feel guilty. It must be your fault. Very universal.
We're talking to Jane Fonda about her dad, her mom, a whole lot of other things, an extraordinary life, and it's captured in her new book, My Life So Far. We'll be right back. And we are back. We're talking to Jane Fonda, her new book, My Life So Far. You reveal that from high school to age 40, bulimia. Mm-hmm. Talk about that. What is it, and how did you know about it, and take us through it?
Well, I didn't know what it was. In fact, it wasn't until I wrote my first workout book, when I had already recovered, but that I discovered there was a name for it. But when you feel that you're not good enough and that you need to be perfect, you sort of, at least I did, I kind of became disembodied. I moved out of myself. And the empty space that was left when I moved out was filled with anxiety, and I kind of numbed it by a food addiction. It could have been other things. It could have been drugs or alcohol or anything. But mine was a food addiction, and I suffered from it for over 25 years, and nobody knew about it. Like alcoholism, it's a disease of denial. Only unlike alcoholism, it's easy to have nobody know about it. But it makes life difficult.
How could you do that? You would eat a lot.
Yeah, I would either starve myself, like as an anorexic, and not eat anything, or I would eat and throw up.
Cause yourself to throw up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's epidemic. People.
How often? Every day?
It would depend. There would be months when I wouldn't do it, and then sometimes I'd do it 8 times a day. I was never hospitalized the way some are, but Tim, this is epidemic in this country. We've tended to forget Terry Schiavo. Her husband has said that she probably would not have had that happen and would not have gone, into that kind of coma had it not been for the fact that she was bulimic. It's
when she
rampant.
She had potassium.
Yes, it's rampant. Girls feel that you don't know why you're doing it. There's this terrible anxiety that hits you when you enter adolescence because suddenly your lack of perfection becomes, very noticeable. And you want to try to be perfect. And it's a way of self-numbing. And we have to end our cultural request of girls to be perfect. Good enough is good enough. We have to teach our girls that.
Did you talk to anybody about it?
No. You never talk to anybody because you don't
Not
want
even your
anyone
friends.
to try to stop you, because it's so disgusting.
What should young girls today do who are watching this if
Well,
they recognize themselves in your voice?
I think the most important thing for girls and their parents to understand is the emptiness that they're trying to fill with food is really a hunger for spirit. It's a hunger for wholeness. It's an emotional issue, and you have to get to what it is that's missing. You have to get to the reasons why you moved outside and became disembodied, and you have to work on re-inhabiting yourself and accepting yourself the way you are.
Have you found out that a lot of other women your generation had a similar situation?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. And, even I've talked about it publicly for decades. When I wrote my first workout book, that was when I first discovered there was a name for it, bulimia, anorexia. But since this book has come out, the letters that I'm getting for mostly women, but also some men who either have suffered from it or have daughters that suffer from it is enormous.
How did you get involved with workout? I mean, you were so far ahead of the curve in terms of the workout videos and that an extraordinary success. How many tapes were there in the end? Workout tapes?
I don't know. It's still to this day the largest selling tape of all time, any kind of tape. No other tape has ever sold as many as mine.
How did you get involved in it?
I met a woman named Lenny Kasdan who taught me the workout, and I never thought it would be so successful, and it really was in spite of ourselves. I had no idea that it would happen, but I know what it did for me, and I was looking for ways to raise money for the political work that I was doing in California with the Campaign for Economic Democracy with my then husband Tom Hayden, and so I started the business as a way to fund the organization, and it just took off. And the reason it took off is because women like me just suddenly discovered empowerment through exercise. And it wasn't so much even, it always starts off with you want to be thin, and then you discover that there's all these other things that happen, like you feel good about yourself and you feel empowered, and it's like self-respect comes through your muscles. It's an amazing psychological experience. And I knew that I tapped into something that wasn't being talked about. And it did it for me, so I know it would do it for other women.
Had you worked out during your life?
All my life, well, all my adult life, I had studied ballet. See, when I was coming up, women were not supposed to sweat. You didn't work out. You sort of sat on the ground and moved like this, or you had things that wiggled your fanny. And
it was Title IX. There were no sports for young women.
No. It was the men's part of the gym, and then the women kind of wiggled. But you certainly didn't sweat. So the thing that I found that had an effect on me in terms of endorphins and in terms of how I felt was ballet. So I studied ballet for a long, long time, for 20-some years. That was my form of exercise. And then I broke my foot and had to look for something else to do, and I came upon the workout.
You took the ballet, fast forward, put a little music on it, and we have a Jane Fonda workout.
Sort of.
And it hasn't stopped. It still continues to sell. Do you still work out?
Well, it doesn't. Actually, it's coming back. We were putting them back out on DVDs, but it was off the market for a long time. Yes, I do. I work out, kind of limp along.
We're going to find out why. We're going to take another quick break. And we are back talking to actor, political activist, and now author Jane Fonda, My Life So Far. We were talking about exercise. What do you do at age 67?
Well, I'd be doing more, but I have osteoarthritis, and I'm getting a hip replacement in June. But normally I bike, I swim, I hike, and I do yoga and lift weights.
Pretty active.
Try to be.
What kind of diet?
It depends on the day. I don't know. I can't wait for the tour to be over so I can eat ice cream. I love ice cream. I'm pretty good about what I eat. I try to eat something dark green every day, and.
But not strictly vegetarian.
No.
Some good red meat occasionally.
Bison.
Yes. That's the Ted Turner influence.
Yes.
You really like it?
Oh, it's great, and it's got lower fat and cholesterol than turkey. It's very, very tasty if it's cooked right. Yeah.
Plastic surgery. What's your view of it?
That's what Diane Rehm said today. What do you think about facelifts? Somebody's got to get old so our children will know what it looks like. I mean, it's like everybody's old from here down and their faces are, I don't know. I mean, it scares me. I can understand why women do it, and I understand why, you try to sort of improve on nature a little bit, but that transformation that happens when the face gets full of collagen and all that kind of stuff, it's sad to me. We're losing our character and our personality, and I don't want to lose, you know, so I got wrinkles. So,
why do you think plastic surgery is so popular?
Because we're scared of age in this country, because age is so demonized. It's not true in other countries. You know, I've lived in other countries, and I'm in France, for example. French women, and I hope it doesn't change, they're admired and respected and held dear, the actresses and everything, even when they get old, the Simone Signorets and Jean Moreau's and Annie Girardot's and all those. And here, you know, you reach a certain age and you're out, you're over the hill, and it's, women are scared. It's scary.
At a stage in your life, you had breast implants.
Yeah.
And then changed your mind.
Yeah.
Why?
Well,
why'd you make the decision initially, and then why'd you change your mind?
Because I felt I was really unhappy. I was very unhappy. It was about the same time that I decided I didn't want to do movies anymore. And, you know, when you're feeling empty, you become very vulnerable to the consumer notions of what it's supposed to be like to be a woman. And so I thought, well, maybe if I stick out more here, then everything will be all right and I'll be perfect and I'll be more womanly, you know.
Did it make it feel better initially?
Initially, yeah. And then I felt ashamed, frankly. And none of the men I was with liked it. Real men like real. And
so how many years later?
10. And the doctor that I went to said many women, when they reach a certain age, say, out with them, away with them. We're not the same anymore. I certainly wasn't the same anymore. I was a different woman. I didn't need appendages to, it's just, hey, good enough is good enough.
You write repeatedly of the disease, the please.
Mm-hmm.
It really is a central part of your life, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Why?
Well, because of the things we talked about earlier, because of a mother who couldn't love and a father who wanted me to be perfect, or at least that's how I felt, and I wasn't good enough. And so, you know, when you grow up that way, what happens is when you come to a relationship, you want to leave on the doorstep the things that you think aren't lovable, and you want to only bring to the door the things that may appear to be perfect, but we're not supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to be complete, not perfect. And you can't have a relationship if all you bring to the table is a part of yourself instead of your full, authentic self. And, you know, so that's why.
One of the more sensational things that came from the book was your first husband, Roger Vadim, would ask you to have other women involved in sex. Why did you ever do that? What was going on in your mind at the time?
I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough, and I didn't want him to leave me. And he never forced me. See, that's where misogyny is so insidious. It's just, you think, I won't exist if this man doesn't love me and doesn't stay with me, and so I will betray my heart and silence my voice of desire in order to please him. And you can get so adept at it that you do it even before he asks. I'm going to be an Academy Award-winning black belt codependent, whatever, and just be totally perfect.
Did you consider yourself a feminist back then?
Not then, no. Well, I still suffered from what I call the disease to please, even when I began to identify myself as a feminist, yes. But I didn't, it was too scary to really understand what that meant. You know, I could put it in my movies, I could read the books, I had the, you know, I could support women, I could do everything except look into myself and ask myself, are you being true to yourself in this relationship? Or are you once again giving yourself up for your man? And it was only once that I said, I'm not going to do it anymore, that I was able to fully recognize what feminism means.
What does it mean?
It means to be a full human being and to bring that to the table and say, this is who I am. If you can't take it, I'm sorry. I'd rather be alone.
When you were going through this with your husband, and it's hard for people to understand, I think, in many ways, and you write about it.
It's so common.
So common.
So common.
Did you think that was it just playing a role, or did you think that you were bisexual? What was in your mind?
I didn't know. I don't know, because I would get drunk, so I wouldn't feel the anger.
And at some time, you would actually go out yourself
Sometimes.
and find the prostitutes and
A girl who feels that she's not good enough will silence her own voice of desire and not know what she likes anymore. And all she listens to is the man's desire. And most men, they're not bad, but they feel a certain sense of entitlement, and they don't notice the subtle signs that a woman is sending to let him know that she's unhappy. She hopes that he will. She doesn't dare say, She hopes that he'll see that she's angry and hurt, but he doesn't see. And so she numbs herself and doesn't even know how she feels anymore.
But you finally said enough and
Yes.
ended the relationship.
Yes.
What brought that on? Accumulation?
Just not wanting to hurt anymore, and knowing that you know, it was different at different stages of my life, but sort of a new path opening up that didn't have anything to do with my body and how I looked and how I was as a sexual being, but it had to do with my values and my activities, and I wanted to be part of the anti-war movement, and I wanted my life to have meaning, and I wanted to make a difference. And so I moved into an entirely new context, and 2 years into that I met my second husband, and you know, and then
Tom Hayden.
yeah.
We're going to come back and talk about that and a whole lot more. Jane Fonda is our guest. Her book, My Life So Far, What a Life It Has Been. We'll be right back. Final thought?
Well, you know, as I'm hearing myself speaking about this to you on national television, I'm thinking, you know, it can sound salacious and it can sound like gossip, and the reason that I have included these things in my book is because of how common they are. I work with young girls now. I know how epidemic it is for girls to do things that they don't want to do. Oral sex is the current epidemic, you know, just to please without listening to their own bodies, give themselves away thinking it's not really intimate when in fact it goes to their souls. And I wanted, because for me, I didn't never depend on a man financially. So it really shows how deep this goes when someone like me is so willing to give up my voice. I just wanted to say that because it sounds gossipy, and it's not how it's written.
No, not at all.
No.
Yeah, I think you made that very clear.
Thank you.
You mentioned Tom Hayden and your involvement in the anti-war movement in Vietnam. 2 words, Hanoi Jane. What do you think when you hear that?
What comes to mind right away is that when I came back from Hanoi, 6 months went by and nobody paid much attention. That photograph on the anti-aircraft gun, it wasn't news. It was only when the right wing decided to make it news and to create a myth called Hanoi Jane that the myth was created. There's so much rage about the Vietnam War. We don't understand it. There's been so much revisionism that it's prevented the American people from coming to terms with Vietnam, and I'm a lightning rod. And because this myth has been created, a lot of soldiers, it's easier to hate me than to hate the government and the men who lied to them and sent them there. And so I feel sad about that, and I understand it. The ideologues, the swift boat types who build the myth and need the myth, that's something different. That's sad. That's pathetic and ideological and based on lies. And it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with them.
But you can understand why many veterans believe that when you go to the country of the enemy and call the American soldiers war criminals.
I never did.
Guilty of genocide.
Never did. Never did. I was the one who would stand up at demonstrations here and say, the soldiers are not our enemy. They know better than we do what's happening over there. let's support our soldiers. I opened an office in Washington called the GI office to support active duty servicemen and women. I spent 2 years working with veterans and GIs. I never said those things. That's an internet hoax, ever. People have to understand the context. I came into the anti-war movement 8 years into the Vietnam War. We were being lied to by our government, and men were dying as a result, not to mention Indochinese. Most American peoples opposed the war. Most of Congress opposed the war, and the war was being escalated. I felt that something drastic and dramatic had to be done. I mean, 300 Americans had gone to Vietnam, North Vietnam before me, but I knew that my going was going to be different. But I needed to blow the lid off it. Nixon was lying to us. And so and bombing the dikes of North Vietnam, upon which life there depended. And I wanted to go and film it and bring back evidence, and it stopped a month after I got back. It's easier to hate me than it is to hate a government that lied. But because we've never learned the lessons, it's happening again.
But if you're a soldier and you see Jane Fonda in North Vietnam on the radio, or posing for a picture, or captured in a photograph with an anti-aircraft gun, and laughing and giggling.
No, I can understand.
They are filled with rage. They think that you are aiding and abetting the enemy,
right.
Treasonous in their minds, and they are justified very much in their minds because they observed your behavior.
And they think that that somehow was responsible for the deaths and the killings, which of course it wasn't. I wrote in a great detail in my book why I went and exactly what I did there and what I didn't do, and how I ended up on that anti-aircraft gun, which was terrible, just a terrible lapse of judgment. And I've apologized for the last 2.5 decades for that. I understand why that would make soldiers angry.
Do you wish you had never gone?
Never gone? Oh no, I'm glad I went. I think that it helped. Just today I was on a show and I got 5 letters from vets saying, thank you. You helped shorten the war. Many veterans understand and you know, have forgiven and said that they didn't ever need to forgive because it was other people that they felt angry at. But I understand why some have a hard time forgiving. I do, and I feel compassion for that. I'm glad I went. I think it helped end the war, and it helped end the bombing of the dikes.
Did you ever think of running for public office?
Never, no.
Are you going to be involved in politics in, say, the next presidential campaign?
Tim, you know, I carry baggage. I have to own that. I have to take responsibility for it. Not all candidates want to have to take on my baggage. So, you know, what I try to do is to register women to vote because we need the woman's voice in the political arena.
Do you think Hillary Clinton could make a good president?
I think she could make a good president. Whether she could become president today in America, I don't know.
What's your sense? Is America ready for a woman?
I'm not sure that we're ready.
Why?
Well, we are, you know, I have spent a lot of time in other countries. We are very conservative in this country when it comes to strong women. And I don't exactly know why that's true, but we have a hard time with strong women.
We're going to take a quick break and come back and talk to Jane Fonda about her book, My Life So Far, and what she's involved with now. And we are back. We're talking to Jane Fonda, her new book, My Life So Far. You are now a Christian. What does that mean?
Feminist Christian.
A feminist Christian. Okay, define that. Christian.
I have to qualify it because it's hard for somebody like me today to say that they're a Christian because the word has become so loaded politically and so identified with fundamentalism. But I have discovered that that feminism and Christianity are very compatible.
In what way?
The teachings of Jesus are the teachings of feminism, that everyone, regardless of gender, regardless of wealth, is to be considered in their full humanity and protected and honored and respected. And that's what feminism is. You know, the majority of the people on earth are not less than the minority, which are men. And I believe that Jesus was saying that. It doesn't always appear in the Bible or in the speakings of Christians, you know, in various parts of the world, but Jimmy Carter called me the other day because he's a friend of mine, and he heard me saying something like this on Larry King, and he said, I totally agree with you. I'm writing a book next fall, and it says that women's rights and feminism and Christianity are very compatible. And I didn't know for a while. I thought maybe I'd made a mistake, but it's been very important to me to feel, remember I talked about that empty place that I used to fill with food and alcohol, and it began to fill with reverence about 7 years ago. And
was there a moment? Was there a born again moment?
little step? No, it was little steps. I really, there was a feeling of being led, really, a sense of being called, and
do you pray?
I do. I do.
Do you believe in the afterlife?
I can, to this extent, I can feel my father. He comes to me in my dreams, laughing and smiling and telling me that everything is okay. There's this quote I use in the book at the beginning.
That's a much different Henry Fonda.
Yeah, I know. Well, it must be. Things are good over there. There's a great speech that he makes at the end of Grapes of Wrath where he says we're all really just part of a big soul. And I guess that's what I view as an afterlife. I think that, you know, if you live right and you live your values, whether you're Muslim or Buddhist or Jewish or Christian, that your essence will survive in the air, in the ether, in your children, in their cells, in the plants, everywhere.
Are you afraid of death?
No, no. You know what I'm scared of? I'm scared of getting to the end with a lot of regrets. And that's why I'm trying to be real intentional about how I spend my third act.
And that's why you called it beginning.
That's right, yes.
Your third husband, Ted Turner, said religion is for losers.
Yeah,
Did
that's
that
right.
have a powerful effect on you when he says things like that?
Not when I first heard him say it, because I agreed. But it's why I didn't tell him when I became a Christian, because, I mean, he wasn't the head of the debating team at Brown University for nothing. I mean, he can talk about anything, talk me out of anything. And
is he an atheist?
Maybe he would say that. I think he's an agnostic.
Searching.
He ends every speech with "God bless you," and he almost was going to join the ministry. He had some very tragic things in his life, including the very painful death of his sister from lupus when he was 17. And I think the way some people do, he felt there can't be a God that would allow this kind of suffering for a young girl. And
why do bad things happen to good people? The eternal mystery.
You know, but also, Tim, I think to open yourself to a greater power, whatever you want to call it, the Almighty, and to really receive that is scary for people who don't want to go there. You know, it's why people tend to grow old and get real brittle and have heart attacks and things. There needs to be a softening, and that's where the sacred and the reverence comes in. You can feel it in your cells. You can feel it in how you relate to everything, including other people, and it's just amazing.
And yet your desire to please was so strong that you were a closet Christian with Ted Turner. And didn't feel comfortable for years.
Well, no, he knew. I mean, I told him later. He found out by accident and got very angry. And anyway, and then we separated 2 years later.
Is that pretty much the cause of the separation?
Only a small part.
What are you doing now with young girls?
I have an organization in Georgia called the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention and the Jane Fonda Center at Emory University School of Medicine. And we work both with adults who work with children, with teens, to help train them to better understand and be able to work with teens and identify problems and so forth. And we work with young mothers and help them become empowered and know how to be better parents and go to school and graduate and develop job skills. And we work with young kids to help them set goals and to see a future for themselves. I guess that's the simplest, fastest way I can describe it. I'm really proud of the work. It's 10 years old this year. And
you can actually point to young women who've been turned around.
Yes, Yes, and when I started 10 years ago, Georgia had the highest rate of teen pregnancy in the country, and we've dropped now to 7th. It's still way too high, way too high. And, you know, I wondered why I felt this as a calling, and then I realized these are my issues.
Jane Fonda, and you write about them all in a very compelling way. Your book, My Life So Far, thank you for a most interesting hour.
Thank you, Tim. It's been a pleasure.
And we'll be